Hey guys, it's Caine of the Murphy guys. I'm reviewing this a movie that I really was not looking forward to at all, but I have seen it, and that of course is the sequel that we all needed, that being Sherlock Gnomes. And what Sherlock Gnomes essentially about is, of course, we follow Romeo and Juliet after they have gone together. But this time, though, they start to notice that there are suddenly, gnomes disappearing. They don't really know what's going on. So they enlist the help of Sherlock Gnomes, of course, the world's greatest detective, to basically figure out what's going on, hopefully figure out, why these gnomes are disappearing, and keep them, obviously, from getting smashed within the process, and that's really all I'm going to say. So Sherlock Gnomes in general, I could not have been looking forward to this movie less, honestly. I was absolutely dreading this movie. So Sherlock Gnomes in general, I'm not going to sugarcoat this, guys. I was dreading the fuck out of this movie. I really was. I mean, just the trailers in general, they just look so LCD and just potty humor and just nothing that we really needed. It looked so unnecessary. It didn't really seem like there was any audience for this movie whatsoever. And especially the fact that the only trailer released was one in which it had, like, this voiceover. It just really did not seem like they were very confident about the movie at all. So honestly, I really could not have been looking forward to this less. Really, I couldn't have. This was easily one of my least anticipated movies of the entire year, honestly. And I have to say, after watching it, this is not that bad. I did not hate Sherlock Gnomes. Is it a good movie, though? No, this is not a good movie. It feels so unnecessary, and it's a very messy movie, and there are definitely quite a few problems, but we're getting into it right now, starting off with the cast. Now, let me be honest with you guys, I don't really remember the first movie. I really don't. I remember it's a thing. I watched it when I was younger. I used to have the Blu-ray. Suffice to say, I don't, and I guess that kind of sums it up. It's just not a movie I feel very strongly about. But what I do remember is that movie did have very well done acting. It had actors that actually did try for the most part, and I will say that with this movie. I do think everyone for the most part did do a pretty good job. Let's talk about James McAvoy and Emily Blunt. You kind of have to talk about them together in this movie because on their own, there's really not much there, but they play their parts pretty well. They do have, I think, decent chemistry, and I do think they work well together. Juliet definitely has a lot more to shine in this movie for sure. It's not like Romeo doesn't, it's just Juliet has a lot more to do, and I do think Blunt did a really good job in this role. There isn't really a lot for them to do in this movie, though, so it's not really, there's really not much to say when it comes to their role, because there's just not really a lot for them to do, and it's kind of hard to not do well here. So, yeah, that's really all I gotta say about them. Easily, though, the standout of this movie is Johnny Depp as Sherlock Gnomes. Now, I know a lot of people were very 50-50 with this casting. Any Depp role at this point, especially, with the amount of stuff he does, any Depp role I think anyone takes with a grain of salt, and I'm happy to say he was very well casted here. I thought he really got into the role of Sherlock Gnomes very well. He is very monotone, but he also is very smart. He's very determined to take down Moriarty, and believe it or not, what the trailer doesn't tell you is that a large majority of this movie, it basically is his movie. It really is. I mean, the gnomes are in there, but this is Sherlock's movie in every way possible, and Depp really does do a great job. He's very likable, he's very fun in the role, and I do think he was very well casted here, and definitely for me, he was easily the standout of this film for sure. And then everyone else I do think did a pretty good job here. Chiwetel Ejiofor I thought was really great as Watson. Wasn't expecting anything from me because we didn't really see him in the trailer, but he was good here. Mary J. Blige, for what she has, she's good in this movie. She plays Sherlock's ex-Irene, and I thought she was good in this movie for what she had. Actually, a musical number of hers is one of the standouts for sure, but she definitely was really good. I thought all the returning actors, like Michael Caine and Maggie Smith, I thought they all did a pretty good job. No one really blew me away or anything like that, but no one absolutely annoyed me either. Who I really didn't like, though, is the actor that played the villain for Moriarty. No, this did not work. They tried to make him this, like, cartoony, stereotypical villain, and it just didn't really work. I really was not a fan of his character. He really did get on my nerves quite a few points. I don't think that he was like the worst thing ever, but just in general, I really was not into his character. He was just, they were trying to make him like this modernized villain, and thankfully no one is really on his level, but he really was not good here. They tried to make him likable, and he's just really not at all. But the rest of the cast, I think, overall did do a pretty good job, and for a film that is so late in the game and that no one really wanted, just the fact that I can say this movie actually did have competent performances, that in itself is kind of a miracle. So now let's get to the directing and the writing, which now we get to the stuff that isn't really that great, because the directing in this movie, yeah, it's kind of messy. It really is. I mean, I'll say right off the bat, the jokes, almost all of them really do fall flat. There were very few times I was laughing in this movie, and that's not necessarily because the comedic timing was off. It just, I didn't really know what was supposed to be funny. I will say, a lot of the really cringy humor that's in the trailer is actually not in this movie, or it's not said in the way it is in the trailer, thank God. There was a lot of really bad, like, gnome puns and potty humor, and thankfully that is not in this movie, and that's something I was happy about overall. The comedy, when it's there, I did chuckle a couple times. One side plot involving this gnome and this frog character that he's in love with, I actually did get some humor out of that. But anything Moriarty said, I really thought fell flat, and my audience really was not laughing a ton, so yeah, the humor here really wasn't that great. I did think the dramatic moments actually did work pretty well, and that's mainly because we do care about these characters. Romeo, Juliet, they're likable characters. You want to see their relationship survive. They're kind of going through their own thing this movie, and I did think that aspect was definitely very good. And the mystery as well. There isn't really a huge mystery or anything, but I did think the adventure aspect, that was definitely there, and that was something that I do think was good. It's just a bit messy. It's not nearly as messy, though, as the writing. The writing for this movie, it's a bit all over the place. It really is, because the movie starts off and immediately it feels like two different movies. It really does. It felt like they had like a Romeo and Juliet sequel planned, and then someone had this idea to, for some reason, insert Sherlock, that story into here. And it just doesn't really feel like it needed to be here, honestly. It feels like they just wanted to make a Sherlock Holmes movie that was animating, kind of, parodying, the Sherlock TV show, because that's very much what this seems like. You honestly could cut the gnomes out of the movie, and I feel like the movie is kind of the same. I mean, sure, they do play an integral role in this movie. It's not like they don't, but they're just much more to the side than I expected. The trailer builds this up as like a big sequel, and it doesn't really feel like such. It just kind of feels like a spin-off movie, and I think, honestly, they could have just done a Sherlock Holmes movie and cut the whole gnome stuff out of it, because the Sherlock Holmes story actually is fairly well done. In fact, the best part of this movie, without a doubt, is the relationship between Sherlock and Watson. Sure, we've seen it before, but it's handled surprisingly really well here. I was surprised with how well handled this story was. I definitely did not expect that to happen. I expected it to be this very sort of underlying element that's not very fleshed out at all, but their relationship actually did feel really good here. They really do get into the come-gate relationship that these two do have, how Sherlock often doesn't really give Watson the credit that he truly deserves, and I actually really did like that story. I was very surprised where they went with it, and I did think it was overall well handled. The whole thing with Moriarty, though, it's a bit of a mess. It really is. I mean, Moriarty, he's the villain in the movie, without spoiling anything, just the way they pull that off. Not only is it predictable, but it just feels like they just needed this, they just needed Moriarty in there. So they just kind of shoved him in there, and it just never really felt like he fit into this movie. Especially his humor does not go with a lot of this movie, and it just really didn't work overall. The main story between Romeo and Juliet, it's not bad. It's really not, but the main stuff, aside from Sherlock, does not really feel like a movie. It feels more like a NBC, like, Thanksgiving or Christmas special. Not one of the bad ones, but just one of the ones you watch and you don't really think much about. And that's really how I feel about this movie, honestly. I watched it, I don't really think much of it. You know, they're just kind of there. They're on this side mission, you know, with Sherlock, and they're there, obviously, to save all the gnomes from being destroyed. And it is a good mission, and I think definitely that is something that, you know, is overall interesting, but it just did not really feel like we needed this movie. The whole movie feels very unnecessary. There's never a point where I'm like, yes, we definitely needed this sequel. So that really, I think, is the biggest problem with this movie. There isn't really a way for them to escape the whole unnecessary feel of it all, because that really is the tone throughout this whole movie. I'm just watching, I'm like, why is this a thing? You know, I'm not dreading it or anything. I'm not, like, hating myself. I'm just kind of sitting here like, why is this why is this here? You know, who is this for? Who really wanted this sequel? Because it didn't really seem like it needed to happen. Also, as good as Mary J. Blige is in this movie, her character did not need to be here. You could have cut her out of this movie, and it would have been exactly the same. She's in, like, one or two scenes, and to me, it just felt like she was there for padding. That's really the only reason she's there in this movie, is because they needed to accumulate a certain runtime, and, you know, in order for them to achieve that, they needed to insert this character in there that really did not need to be in this movie. You could have cut her out, and I think, like I said, the movie would be exactly the same with not much changes at all. The animation is actually really good here. I was impressed by the animation. It's very fluid, it's very appealing, and that's something that I definitely really did enjoy. Let's talk about the score, because one of the best things, even though I don't remember the first movie, one of the best things I do remember is the incorporation of Elton John's music, and that is in here, but it doesn't really have a place in this movie. It's not nearly as much of, as prominent as it was in the first movie. So if you're looking for a lot of really catchy Elton John music, you'll get it for like the first half, but after a certain point, it just kind of goes away, and I don't really think they need to do that here. Again, it did not feel like this needed to be a Romeo and Juliet sequel. It could have just been a Sherlock Holmes movie, and I would have been completely fine with that. The editing, it's fine. It's very well paced. You know, it's fast paced, and you know, I never really felt the length or anything like that. I was surprised. I really thought it was going to, but I didn't really feel bored or anything. There were a couple scenes where I was like, all right, can we pick this up a little bit? But I never really felt bored. Like, I was overall entertained by what I was watching, but it's really nothing I'll ever watch again. It's nothing that I really would recommend. And like I said, the whole movie, I just didn't really feel anything during it. However, I will say this, for kids, everything I just said is not going to matter for them. Kids, I think, are really going to enjoy this. I think this is definitely something to take your kids to. You're not going to hate yourself during it. You might feel a little bit underwhelmed, and there might not be a lot for you, but it's not the worst thing you can take your kids to. There are definitely worse kids' movies out there than there are Sherlock Gnomes, and I think that's something that, you know, in general, just especially because the marketing, I definitely am very happy about. Again, it's nothing really I'm going to remember. I'm probably going to forget about it once I'm done with this review, honestly, but I surprisingly didn't hate this movie, and I am going to give Sherlock Gnomes overall a C. Like I said, guys, it's straight down the middle. It's really nothing amazing. It kind of just feels like a TV special or a Sherlock Holmes movie, and that's really it. But that's in my review, guys. Let me know what you guys thought of this movie overall, left your thoughts. And I don't really know who's going to see this movie. I haven't really seen any ads for it on TV or anything like that, but that's in my review. Hope you guys enjoy. See you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.